The first little part of the activity was to find out whether there were any incomplete sentences. That's sentences that don't make sense because there isn't a proper verb in them. Did anybody spot any incomplete sentences?
In the second paragraph, it having the obvious adaptation of the hump, I feel you ought to put the camel has the obvious you need to say what the it is.
Right, so what have you actually done to turn it then into a complete sentence?
Changed the having to has.
That's right. Now can you see that what you've got there now is a proper verb? The camel has. Having on its own isn't a single verb that stands on its own in a sentence. You can't do that. Is there another sentence anybody's picked out that's not complete? You thought you might have
I've got one in the first paragraph,
right?
Where we've got a full stop after environments,
yes,
and then it leads straight on to the camel being the exception. Well, it hasn't told us in that sentence what it's being an exception to.
Right.
So I felt that by putting a comma after environments, which would then read water loss is a severe problem for most living creatures in hot, arid environments, the camel being an exception.
With a comma, yes. Exactly the same strategy as used before. So what you've actually done is between you've found two ways of making a very similar situation into a proper sentence. In one example, which Ruth did, she broke it into two separate sentences and changed the having into has. In the second one, Giselle's tacked the second bit, the camel being an exception, onto the first sentence to make it part of it by putting a simple comma in after environments, building in a pause, which somebody reading will read. Okay? Did you feel when you read through Terry's answer all the sentences were the right length to read comfortably?
No.
Andrew, come on then.
The one sentence starts, it is able to survive rises in body temperature of several degrees without ill effect, and it also has long nasal passages which help to cool air, leaving the lungs and the body because air is drawn through them at night when it is cooler, so cooling the tubes before it passes to the lungs where it is heated as the lungs are warmer. And that's far too long to make sense. And reading it out loud, it sounds garbage. You'd have to break it into smaller sentences.
I would put, for a start, I'd start the whole thing, they are able to survive rises, because the previous sentence is referring to camels, not a single camel. So I'd start it, they are able to survive rises in body temperature of several degrees without ill effect, full stop. Then I put, camels also have long nasal passages which help to cool air, leaving the lungs and the body, full stop again. This is because air is drawn through them at night when it is cooler, so cooling the tubes before it passes to the lungs, where it is heated as the lungs are warmer, and leave the full stop there.
Any ideas where commas might go on here?
What about when it is cooler, put this is because air is drawn through them at night when it is cooler, comma, so cooling the tubes before it passes to the lungs, again, comma, where it is heated as the lungs are warmer.
Yes, that would make sense.
There. Yes.
We're thinking about the logical structure of this account. That is, whether all the points follow in the clearest and easiest manner, whether it's easy to follow, or whether you feel the fact it could be restructured. Giselle, what do you think?
I feel that the second paragraph, which is mentioning the hump and how it can store water in the hump, should come after the second sentence in the first paragraph, where it's saying camels have evolved such that they can survive with a minimum of water. I would leave the last sentence, which is then mentioning the nose, until later on in the first paragraph, where it mentions nasal passages. So that piece could then go in with the next sentence.
Right, that would go with that. Any other ideas about restructuring it?
Sorry.
Well, it does say that nasal passage is where some of it condenses and is retained. The water is retained, but then it goes on to mention the mucus again at the bottom. Nose is lined with mucus. So that's actually part of that last sentence in the first paragraph.
You'd bring it up and tack it on to the end of the first paragraph.
Insert it in some way, because it does actually say the same thing.
That's right. What do you feel about
that? That's
what
I agree with Andrew. Yes, move that up to where it's talking about the nose, and leave the hump at the bottom so that it follows on from the other helpful strategies at the bottom.
A nice picture of a hump at the bottom of a camel, which is rather delightful. Again, what you've done is you've produced between you two different approaches to reorganising the structure of this answer, which makes it more logical, and either is acceptable. Can you see in both cases what you've done that's in common? What have you done that's common?
We've sorted the information into two distinct paragraphs.
One about
the nose, and one about other methods.
Right. So whether the hump comes before the nose or the nose before the hump in the camel is immaterial. It'll work out either way. But it makes it much more logical. That's great. That's very good. Ambiguities. In other words, where things don't quite say what you think they should have said in the passage. Did anybody spot anything there that they felt didn't say what it should have done? This will check whether you know your science as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yes.
Come on then, Andrew.
Well, there is one. It says, talking about the hump, this can store a considerable quantity of water. If you go back for the notes, it'll actually tell you it doesn't store water, it stores fat.
Right.
But which can be metabolised to give out water.
So then, where does the water come from?
It's actually coming out of the hump.
Yes.
But it's not stored as water.
No,
It's a byproduct of when you break the fat down.
Yeah.
Right, so it's a byproduct of that.
Yeah.
So in actual fact, this is really a factual inaccuracy, isn't it,
Yes.
that is actually built in?
So I thought on the same sentence, it says this can store a considerable quantity of water, enabling it to go for extended periods without drinking, implying that the hump doesn't need to drink for long periods of time.
Good thinking. This, at the beginning of that sentence, refers back directly to hump, but it refers to the camel. Whereas the way Terry's written it, of course, it sounds as if the it is referring to the hump. That was one I'd missed, so I think you've done well here to pick that one out. So how would you rewrite it again, Ruth?
I put this can store a considerable amount of water, enabling the camel to go for extended periods without drinking, just clarifying partway through the sentence who it is that doesn't need to drink.
That's right. Anything else anybody spotted?
Yes, second sentence. Well, the first sentence says, water loss is a severe problem for most living creatures in hot, arid environments. The camel being an exception, inferring that it's not worried about water loss. If it wasn't worried about water loss, then it wouldn't have the means for retaining the water.
Right. So it's still a severe problem for a camel, but you're saying a camel's found ways round.
Round it, yes.
So you need to make that clear.
Yes.
Yeah.
You'd have to incorporate that into the sentence somehow.
Uh-huh. Anything else anyone spotted?
They could clarify what several degrees is a bit more. And several degrees could mean anything from 1 to 5, 6, 7 degrees, which would then kill the camel.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's very true. So in other words, Terry isn't being specific enough in his writing. He's being too open-ended and loose. While you're on that sentence, it's a good one to have brought up for another reason. Has Terry actually explained how the rise in body temperature without ill effect helps the camel and water loss?
No.
So in other words, again, we've got a little passage in somebody's writing where they know what they mean, but they haven't explained it clearly enough to whoever's going to read it, so it's not clear.
And he had kept well under the word limit.
There is another one. Let's see if anyone can get this one. If we look at the very last sentence in that paragraph.
But it hasn't actually mentioned in the paragraph what is being condensed.
So what is it that is being condensed?
It's the vapour from the water.
And not... What does the actual sentence imply is being condensed?
That everything is being condensed.
That's right. It's implying that the whole of the air is being condensed and it's actually the water vapour in it. That's great. I was going to ask you question 5. Is there anything else that constitutes unclear communication? But I almost think that you've picked everything out of here that you can do, and you've also got the factual inaccurate things. When you get a group of you together like this, you can find far more as a group putting your heads together and discussing something than you can when you're trying to do it on your own. I mean, I did this on my own, and as you can see, I didn't get as much out of it as you 3 have pulled out of it together. So I've also learned something as well as you.